Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to today's press conference on the work of the First General Affairs Council under the Hellenic Presidency. It's a pleasure to have here with me the Vice President of the Commission, Maros Šefčovič, as well as Commissioner Tonio Borg. Thank you very much, Vice President and Commissioner, for your presence. As this was the first General Affairs Council under our presidency, we presented once again officially before the Council our priorities and work program for our term in office. Allow me here, however, to emphasize the Hellenic Presidency has already managed to close a number of key files on the legislative agenda, including on updated rules for markets in financial instruments, the so-called MiFID II, which constitutes an important step aimed at establishing a safer, sounder, more transparent and more responsible financial system, as well as the regulation creating a European account preservation order, which facilitates the recovery of cross-border claims for citizens and business, in particular small and medium-sized enterprises, and improve the efficiency of enforcement of judgment in civil and commercial matters concerning cross-border disputes. Furthermore, and in details, we have reached agreement on the legislative package of own resources, on the list of non-EU countries exempt from the visa requirement, on the trade enforcement regulation, on amending regulation, the so-called regulation Brussels I on patent law and the rules on jurisdiction and the recognition and enforcement of the respective judgments, on a new directive on electronic invoicing in public procurement, on the financing of the new common fisheries policy, on updated rules for the introduction of noise-related operating restriction at EU airports. The second point of the Council was a first discussion on the preparation for the March European Council, where we examined and had an exchange of views on the draft annotated agenda. As you know, the agenda of the next Spring European Council has as main priorities, first of all, and as usual, growth, competitiveness and job, the assessment on the European semester, and on the field of external relations, the preparation for the upcoming EU-Africa Summit. This first debate was very, very important, and now our duty and our mission is to elaborate together with the permanent presidency of the European Council and the Commission the next paper of the permanent presidency in order to organize the next debate on the level of the General Affairs Council just before the European Council, and maybe with the presence and the participation of President Van Rompuy during the working luncheon with the European ministers. The second point, under the title of any other business, was a very important discussion on the last referendum in Switzerland. I'm sure you know very well the first reaction of the Commission. You remember the first statement made by the Presidency of the Council. Now, on behalf of the Council, I'm in position to make a very short but very solid and clear statement. The Council of the European Union respects the internal democratic procedure of Switzerland and the outcome of the referendum. On the other hand, the Council expects that the Swiss Confederation will honor its obligation arising from its agreements and treaties with the European Union, always with the frame of the international public law. The four fundamental freedoms are an integral part of the EU-Swiss relations, but the internal market and its four pillars are indivisible. For example, it's not possible to accept the separation and the division between the free circulation of workers or of persons and the free circulation of capitals. The next point, always under the general title of any other business, was the presentation of the last stakeholder conference on the EU strategy for the Adriatic-Ionian region held in Athens last week, the presentation from the part of Romania of a similar conference on the Black Sea cooperation, the information from the part of the Slovenian government about the natural disasters in Slovenia and also in Croatia, and from the part of the Greek government on the continuing earthquakes in Kefalonia, and on our discussion with Commissioner Hunt about the possibility to activate the instruments and the procedure of the European Solidarity Fund. The last point of our session, under the format of a public debate, as you know very well, was a discussion on the famous and very sensitive issue of the genetically modified maize. I prefer, especially on this issue, to give the floor to Commissioner Borg in order to present the final position and stance of the European Commission, because politically speaking, the Council is not in position to present a qualified majority against or for the acceptance of the proposal of the Commission.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, just to give some facts about this cultivation authorization, which is being requested. It started in 2001, 13 years ago. So no one can say that the Commission rushed through this file. It's one of the few files which was pending for 13 years. That is 4 commissions ago, under the Prodi Commission. And since then have had Barroso I and Barroso II. Secondly, during these 13 years, there have been 6 positive opinions of the European Food Safety Agency and 2 court judgments, one as recent as 26th of September of the European Court of Justice, condemning the Commission for failure to act. So the court said you have not acted twice, and therefore you should act. And this is what the Commission did. It took the file, which goes back to 2001, which had been proposed by the Commissioner of that time, and presented it to the Council. Now, the law is very clear on comitology that if there is no negative qualified majority against the proposal, then the Commission not may but shall adopt the proposal. Which is why I have insisted with ministers today, since there was no such negative qualified majority against, to revive the cultivation proposal, which is part of the presidency program of President Barroso. And I hope that we shall have in the weeks to come a full discussion of this proposal, which is based on the principle of subsidiarity and sovereignty. That is to say, if it is approved, and there are already 25 member states in favor out of 28 of this proposal, no one is against, and 3 have abstained in the past, so we are very close to an approval, that each member state decides on its own whether to cultivate GMO on its territory or not. So we are proposing this solution, that each one of the 28 member states will be at liberty to block the cultivation of GMO on its territory, of course on certain grounds which have to be communicated to the Commission, grounds other than health and environment, because those remain the exclusive competence of the Commission proposal. So, in short, if it is a no, it will be a no for everyone. If it is a yes and this cultivation proposal is approved, it will not be a yes for everyone. But there will be the possibility for member states not to allow the cultivation of that GMO crop on its territory. Incidentally, this particular maize, GMO, had already been approved in the past for importation of food and feed. So we already import this particular maize for food and feed purposes. Now there is this proposal which has been languishing before the Commission for 13 years to cultivate this particular maize, which we already import for food and feed purposes. I was very happy that during the discussion there was a renewed interest in the cultivation proposal, and hopefully in the next few weeks we shall have a full discussion on the cultivation proposal, which has already been approved by Parliament based on the principle of subsidiarity, and hopefully also the Council. We are so near in reaching an agreement on this file. Thank you.
The first commitment of the Hellenic Presidency is to organize the next step of this very important and very sensitive debate under the format of the Council for Environment and maybe for Agricultural Affairs. Let me to make a very thin but critical distinction on the field of the genetically modified organisms, and especially on the field of the environmental protection. The position of the member states is very clear and also very direct. The result of this political positioning is that there are 19 state members against the acceptance, 5 member states for the acceptance of the proposal, and 3 abstentions. On the field of the so-called comitology, on the field of the institutional mechanism of the European Union, on the field of the decision-making procedure, our session this morning was an excellent but very difficult workshop about the institutional mechanism, on the institutional mechanism of the European Union. This second field, the institutional one, is also very important, very attractive and very sensitive, some weeks before the official and dynamic opening of the electoral procedure for the next European Parliament. Vice President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. At first, I would like to comment on the previous items before we open for the questions. Concerning the program of the Greek presidency, I think we had also a very good debate on both items, on the program and on the planning for the next European Council. Concerning the presidency, what I think was highlighted by many of our colleagues, that we are very much impressed by the flying start of the Greek presidency and also by yearly results on such a sensitive issues like MiFID, because we know the time is very short and we have to work very, very hard to get everything we can do before the parliamentary recess, before the European Parliament would conclude its legislature and the MEPs will start the pre-election campaign. Therefore, the very important and good start was crucial for successful presidency and for completion of the work which was Commission proposing for this year, which you very well know is very, very particular. Concerning the European Council in spring, this traditionally will be the economic European Council, which will be devoted very much to the European semester. I was highlighting the fact that we have to approach it very, very responsibly this year, because it's for the first time when the full cycle will be completed with the draft national budget assessment, with the annual growth survey, and then with, of course, national reform programs, and later on with adoption of the country-specific recommendations. Because of the European Parliament elections, I was already indicating to the ministers that the schedule would be rather tight, because with the country-specific recommendations we will come after the European Parliament elections, so we will have just a few short weeks for debating them, discussing them, and then by adopting them by the European Council. Another very important element which will be discussed at the European Council, and I think this was very much welcomed by all ministers, was the industrial policy in connection with the 2030 climate and energy framework. All the ministers being underlying the fact that we have to look at these two aspects of the European policies as one, as a very important element in our assessment of what can we do further for enhanced competitiveness of European industry, and how we can actually live up to our expectations and our plans. We'd like to increase the GDP producing industry to 20% by 2020. I also highlighted the fact that we would like to use the opportunity of the European Council meeting for having such a informative and stock-taking discussions where we stand with EU 2020 strategy. You know very well that its implementation was very much affected by the economic crisis. So we just would like to present the latest pictures. Where are we? How we see the attainment, the achievement of the headline goals, and just to present such a complex picture how actually we are doing with the implementation of the Lisbon strategy. And one last very important issue linked to the European Council. If you look at the text, you will see that there are very important placeholders, two of them. One, we hope, is the place reserved for what would be the positive paragraph on the adoption of single resolution mechanism, and the second one on the savings taxations directive, because for the Commission these two items are of absolutely crucial importance. We have to have them in place before the parliamentary recess, and we are of course encouraging, in this case particularly the ECOFIN, to do everything possible to arrive at the conclusion which could be then welcomed by the European Council. The last issue on the Swiss vote, I think that the position as it was presented by President Venizelos was unanimously shared by all member states. I would just add that this vote also led to the consideration that it's very important also from the side of the ministers to explain the pluses, the positive side of the freedom of movement, because Switzerland, according to the OECD statistics, was one country which benefited probably the most from the free movement in Europe, where you have the highest number of international organizations, multinationals, international research institutes, and the fact that the popular vote, which we would respect, could turn in such a way in the country where you have such a low unemployment, I think leads all of us to the very clear thinking that we have to do more in explaining how important this principle for the success and the future of the European Union is, and how we have to work very hard on this issue. What happened next? Of course, now the ball is in the court of the Switzerland. We would wait for official communication from the Swiss authorities what the vote mean, because for us, as it was said by the minister, it's absolutely clear that the international obligations must be met, and the freedoms for us are indivisible. And we showed in the past enormous creativity and respect for Swiss specificities. Therefore, we have almost 100 bilateral agreements, 7 big legal packages agreed in bilateral 1 and bilateral 2. And of course, for us, all of them are considered as one package, and we just cannot pick up such an important principle like the principle of free movement from that package without affecting everything else. So now we will wait how the Swiss government would react to the results, what would be the proposal, and of course we would very carefully analyze the whole situation. And the last item concerning the natural disasters and floods in Croatia Greece and Slovenia. There, I would like to very much appreciate the good cooperation between the Commission and local and national authority. If it comes to the disaster relief procedures, it was very positively appreciated also by the affected member states. And of course, if it comes to the support from Solidarity Fund, there we have a well-established mechanisms, and I was just informing the partners that I think we'll have time until mid-April to present the assessment, and that of course it will be evaluated by the Commission, and then the reaction would follow. Thank you very much.
Consul from TM News Italy. I would like to ask something about GMOs. I would like to understand where we stand now, because we all followed the debate and it was quite interesting. And if I understand well, there is a different opinion between the Presidency and the majority of the Council and the Commission on the responsibility to decide whether to approve or not the maize Pioneer 1507. If I understood well, the legal service from the Council said very clearly the vote has not been has not taken place yet, so the Commission can still amend or withdraw the proposal. That means that the whole thesis that the Commissioner Borg was exposing, saying I'm obliged to approve the GMOs if there's no qualified majority against, is not valid in this moment. It is not valid until when there's no vote. And because the Presidency didn't let the vote take place, now actually, that's what I understand, the responsibility to decide whether to authorize or not, whether to authorize or to withdraw the demand for authorization, lays completely in the hands of the Commission. We need to understand this because we need to explain to the public opinion who is responsible for this authorization. If this authorization gets through, we have a big majority, which is not qualified majority of member states, which is clearly against. Is the Commission taking the responsibility to approve these GMOs, knowing that it can still withdraw the proposal? First of all. Second, sorry. There were 4 abstentions, not 3, President, sorry, because there also the Czech Republic said they were abstaining. So I've counted 4, just to be precise. Portugal, Germany, Belgium, and Czech Republic. And I would like to understand one thing on the directive. How do we? There was a lot of discussion about the directive beside this. Where do we stand now? It looks like the UK is in favor now of the directive. So, Commissioner, do you and President, are you confident that the directive, which would give member states the possibility to ban at the national level GMOs that have been authorized at a European level, do you have the feeling that this can pass now with the UK voting in favor? Thanks. Sorry, it was very long, but it's important to clarify.
No, and it's important to clarify matters. First of all, in the language of my own country, of an expression, do not hide behind your own finger. I am not hiding behind any fingers. The proposal for cultivation was made by the Commission. The Commission can't be against its own proposal. It was made 13 years ago by Commissioner, I think, Dimas at that time, and it went to the SCOFCA. And the Commission at that time, and even today, proposed this because it is bound by the GMO directive, which does not prohibit GMO cultivation in Europe. So much so that we have labeling legislation on GMO. If GMOs were not allowed in the European Union, why then do we have GMO labeling? We have GMO labeling because GMOs, under certain conditions, are allowed in the European Union. And we did not rush on this file. It took 13 years for this file to come before the Council under the old comitology procedure. And we referred this file 6 times to the Parma-based European Food Safety Agency. Of course, I can become an EFSA to myself, and I can say, I do not care what EFSA says, I decide and I overrule EFSA. So it becomes EFSA à la carte. When I like its decisions, I say how good EFSA is and I have full confidence in EFSA. When I don't like its decisions, I change my policy. So for instance, when EFSA said that certain neonicotinoids in pesticides are killing bees, then I accept EFSA and I have full confidence in EFSA. When EFSA 6 times says that this particular maize, which we already approved for food and feed, is not harmful to health, then I ignore its positions for political considerations. And then, of course, we expect third countries not to include political considerations when they block imports to their countries. So the Commission has to take scientific-based decisions. And if Commissioner Dimas, when he had one positive EFSA opinion, proposed this cultivation proposal, how can the Commission not continue this procedure when it has 6 positive EFSA opinions? Of course, EFSA said, it never said no. EFSA said yes, provided you include this condition. And we included all the conditions, changing in part the original proposal to fit with the EFSA opinion, which gives us scientific advice. On the second point, the arithmetic is clear. If first of all, no one opposed the cultivation proposal based on subsidiarity. Till now, no one opposed. In the last vote in the Council, 24 voted in favor. In the meantime, Croatia has joined, and Croatia today, I'm not revealing any secrets, spoke in favor of this cultivation proposal. So unless someone changes his mind, we have 25 member states in favor, and we have 3 member states which abstained. So in answer to your question, if one of those member states, instead of abstaining, votes in favor, then there is a favorable opinion and decision of Council, which along with the favorable opinion, which has already been expressed by the European Parliament, will lead to the adoption of the proposal, which today, following today's decision or non-decision, because it depends on which view you take, we have had no negative qualified majority against this proposal, makes the cultivation proposal even more important to adopt. And I am, let's say, cautiously optimistic that it will be adopted.
Let me to present very briefly the codification of the position of the Presidency on behalf of the Council. First point, without doubt, the Commission has the competence and the responsibility to take the final decision. Second point, after this very critical debate, the Council, always within the frame of the European law, waits from the part of the European Union, from the part of the European Commission, that the College of the Commissioners will take into consideration the positioning of the Member States and the general trend and atmosphere of the Council. Third point, the legal distinction between a debate, a round table on the political intention to vote is something different from the formal, final, and ceremonial act of voting. On the other part, we take into consideration the last very important remark presented by Commissioner Borg on the cultivation directive. Without doubt, every member state has the national competence to ban the cultivation of GMOs. This is something very, very important because the central question for the European civil society and for the civil society in each member states is the question about the cultivation and the use of GMOs.
But can I add to this, Mr. President? the cultivational proposal will give legal validity to these obstacles to cultivation. Because as you know, in some member states, these legal safeguards, they are called, have been challenged with success in certain member states. If we have this European law, they cannot be challenged.
At the back of the room, Ian Trainer from The Guardian. A question for Commissioner Šefčovič. You've just said, basically, on the Swiss issue, on freedom of movement and the indivisibility of the 4 freedoms, that this position was supported unanimously today. Yet the Prime Minister of one quite large member state is arguing precisely for the kind of caps on freedom of movement and internal EU migration that the Swiss are actually voting in favour of. So how can that support be unanimous when David Cameron is actually saying he wants caps and limits to freedom of movement? Thank you.
I think this is the question which, of course, would be better to address to our British colleagues. What I heard today around the table, I think it was quite clear. I mean, there was no one at the table who showed any enthusiasm or any happiness about the results of the Swiss vote. There was a very clear position from all the ministers who intervened, how the freedom of movement is important, how beneficial it is for the European Union. There was one minister actually pointing out that freedom of movement in Europe is still rather limited because we have only 14 million out of 500 inhabitants of Europe living in another member state, which is something like around 2%. And maybe there we have to also look for some of the problems with our competitivity. And more or less the conclusions of the debate was that we, of course, respect the votes, and we now would see what will be the official communications from the Swiss authorities, because for the European Union it would be absolutely important that the Swiss side would respect all this plethora, this high number of bilateral agreements we have. And for us, the freedom of movement principle is indivisible from the rest of the package we've been negotiating with Switzerland for so many years and under sometimes extremely complicated circumstances. So I think that this is a very, very fair description of today's discussion, and therefore I would say that the question you posed was not addressed to the proper addressee. Thank you.
Let me to clarify, the statement of the Presidency on behalf of the Council was approved explicitly by all the Member States, including my British colleague.
Yeah, Martina Herzog, German Press Agency, DPA. To the Commissioner, could you clarify when the Commission might take its decision on the mice, and also if this needs a college decision? So if it needs a college decision, any chance that the vote might not turn out in favor, because then it's not just you taking a decision, but the whole Council? And also on the new cultivation proposal, you said, well, Member States' decisions could not be challenged under the new proposal. But as far as I'm aware, there are concerns that your proposal might not be in accordance with WTO rules and that decisions might be challenged if taken in accordance.
On this last question, you would have been right if there would be complete free discretion on opposing cultivation. But in actual fact, what is inserted in the cultivation proposal is that any member state can block, of course, on certain specific grounds, which could be socio-economic, it could be urban planning, and those we feel would be justified and cannot be challenged under the WTO. And if you were correct in stating this, then even more so today, each individual company, individual country can be dragged before the WTO. While if we have a pan-European proposal which would regulate the grounds on which one can object to the cultivation, I think it would be safer from the legal point of view. This file is no different from the others. So we have the comitology procedure. It is clear that the comitology procedure says that if there is no negative qualified majority, so if you abstain, you are in practice voting in favor of the proposal. Everybody knew this. I said it before the vote. The Commission shall adopt the proposal. But finally, we have our own internal way of taking decisions. The same internal procedure which applies to other files will apply to this file as well, and then it is up to the Commission to decide.
Two more questions.
Ivo Caizzi del Corriere della Sera. A question for President Venizelos. You expressed very clearly the position of the Council about Switzerland with your statement, and you added something very concrete that was involving the free movement of capitals. I would like to ask you if this can mean that European Union can stop, for example, the flow of capital into the Swiss bank, or if you have any other specific idea to make pressure on Switzerland in this very, let's say, sensible area. And also, I would like to know if within the Council, if are true the rumors that inside of the Council, even unofficially, some countries are suggesting to consider the possibility of introduce sanctions against Switzerland, of course, in the economical, financial, and trade sectors.
La position du Conseil et ce qui concerne
The
le
position of the
référendum
Council as regards the Swiss referendum
est très claire.
is very clear.
Nous respectons une procédure
We
interne
respect the internal
constitutionnelle,
proceedings of
mais
Switzerland,
au
its
niveau du
constitutional
droit
procedure,
international public.
but that's in terms of
Nous
public
attendons et nous
international law,
demandons de la part
and we
de la
expect
Confédération suisse
the Swiss
de
Confederation
respecter
to respect
totalement les
fully
traités en vigueur
the treaties in force
et le cadre de référence
and the reference framework
bilatéral entre la
at
Confédération
bilateral
suisse
level between
et
the
l'Union
Swiss
européenne.
Confederation and the European Union.
Au niveau politique,
At political level,
jusqu'aujourd'hui,
hitherto,
nous n'avons pas une initiative suisse
we haven't seen any
concrète et
concrete
officielle.
Swiss initiative, no
Nous
official
avons des
initiative.
informations
We have
journalistiques, mais nous n'avons
information
pas
from
une
journalists,
demande
from
pour,
the press, but we don't have a
renégociation
request for renegotiation
du cadre juridique
of the
existant
existing
entre la
legal
Confédération suisse et l'Union
between
européenne.
the Swiss Confederation and
pour
the
nous,
European Union. So, as far as we're
Cette
concerned,
évolution constitutionnelle
this
interne
internal
n'a
constitutional
pas un intérêt
development
juridique.
has no
Pour nous,
legal
Le
force.
seul texte de référence
For
est
us,
les traités
the
et
only
les agréments qui
text of
existent
reference
entre
is the
les
treaty
deux
and the agreement which exists
interlocuteurs et
between the
partenaires,
two parties
toujours dans le cadre du concept
in the concept
principal
of the main,
du marché
in the
commun.
context of the main
Et comme
concept, which
le
is
vice-président de
the
la
common
Commission,
market. And as the Vice President
a
of the
expliqué,
Commission
pour nous,
explained,
ce concept du
as
marché
far as we're
commun
concerned, this
est un
concept
concept
of the common
indivisible,
market is
basé,
indivisible,
fondé sur
and
les
it is
quatre
based
principes,
on the four
les quatre
principles,
libertés
the four
fondamentales.
fundamental
Ce n'est pas possible
freedoms.
pour nous
It's
d'accepter
not
l'idée
possible for us to
que
accept the idea
nous devons accepter la libre
that
circulation
we have
des
to agree
capitaux, mais
to
pas
free
la libre
movement of
circulation
capital, but
des
not
personnes.
free movement of persons.
Nous n'avons pas discuté sur la possibilité
We didn't
d'appliquer des
discuss the
sanctions.
possibility
Pas du
of
tout.
applying sanctions, not at all.
Hi, Ed Bray from AgriFacts. It's another question for Commissioner Borg. I understand from what you've been saying that the Commission will now adopt this application, the 1507. But can you give us a timeline? When is this going to happen? Is it a matter of weeks, a matter of months? Thanks.
Since this file took 13 years to come to fruition, I am very cautious about giving timelines, because probably when it was proposed in the first occasion in 2001, no one expected that it was still being discussed in 2013. So I am very, very wary about it, even because we need our internal procedures. But I repeat, there is the comitology procedure, which is very clear, and the European Court of Justice said that on this file it is the old comitology procedure which applies, where the comitology procedure says that the Commission has to adopt, but it has to adopt within its own internal procedures. I also said that if there were to be new evidence, completely new evidence about this file, of course, I will not ignore it.
And final question.
Yes. Hi, I'm here for Science Magazine. It's also for Commissioner Borg. Just 2 months ago, the Court of Justice annulled the approval of the floor potato because you had made some changes to your proposal and did not submit them to the Committee of Member States. Here you also say that you've made some changes to account for EFSA's comments on this file. So I was wondering if you're worried that the court might have a similar judgment of that situation.
No, because we took legal advice and the changes which have been made to reflect the scientific opinion of EFSA. So these were changes to make even more stringent conditions, not to make it more lax, more stringent, happened before the vote. While in the Amflora potato, my predecessor had approved the file on behalf of the Commission after the vote had been taken. So in this case, the Council knew what it was approving, what it was abstaining about, what it's voting against, because the changes were introduced to the proposal, which were not radical fundamental changes, but more risk management conditions according to the 6 positive EFSA opinions, and therefore when they came to vote in favour, against or abstain, they knew what the entire package was. Well, in the case of the Amflora potato, it would seem that the contrary happened and it was changed after the vote had been taken.
To conclude with a final statement in Greek. Okay. Εξ ονόματος της Ελληνικής
On
Προεδρίας,
behalf of the Greek Presidency,
θέλω να ευχαριστήσω
I
θερμά
would like to warmly
την
thank
Επιτροπή,
the Commission,
τον κύριο Σεύκοβιτς
Mr. Sefcovic,
και όλα τα κράτη-μέλη που έλαβαν
all
το
the member
λόγο
states who took the
για την
floor
θερμή υποδοχή και την στήριξη των
support
προτεραιοτήτων της Ελληνικής Προεδρίας.
for the
Επίσης,
priorities of the
για τη θερμή
Hellenic Presidency
υποδοχή
and also for the
των
acceptance
πρακτικών
of
αποτελεσμάτων
the
που
practical
παρουσίασε η Ελληνική
results which
Προεδρία
the Hellenic Presidency has already
μετά
produced
από 5 εβδομάδες
after 5
άσκηση των
weeks
καθηκόντων της.
holding the
Θέλω
presidency.
επίσης να
I'd
ευχαριστήσω
also like to thank
το Συμβούλιο και την
the
Επιτροπή
Council and the Commission
για την αλληλεγγύη που
for the
επέδειξαν
solidarity which they showed.
στην φυσική καταστροφή που δυστυχώς
In the case
εξελίσσεται
of the
με τους
natural
συνεχιζόμενους
catastrophe
σεισμούς
which
στην
unfortunately
Κεφαλονιά.
continues with the continuing
Είναι πολύ
earthquakes in
σημαντικό
Kefalonia.
για την ελληνική προεδρία,
very
αλλά
important for the
εν
Hellenic
προκειμένου για την
presidency
ελληνική κυβέρνηση
and also for the
να
Greek
κινητοποιηθούν οι κοινοτικοί μηχανισμοί, ιδίως το
That
Ταμείο
community
Αλληλεγγύης και το ίδιο
mechanisms,
φυσικά
the
ισχύει
European
για την
Solidarity
πολύ
Fund
σοβαρή φυσική καταστροφή στη
to
Σλοβενία, αλλά και
come
στα
into
σύνορα
operation. And this
μεταξύ
applies also to
Σλοβενίας και
Slovenia,
Κροατίας.
the natural disasters
Τέλος, θα
which
μου
have taken place
επιτρέψετε
in
να
Slovenia
διευκρινίσω,
and Croatia.
μιλώντας όχι
And lastly,
ως
can I
Προεδρία
just
του
say,
Συμβουλίου,
not
αλλά
speaking on
ως Έλληνας
behalf
Υπουργός
of the
Εξωτερικών, ότι στο
presidency,
ζήτημα
but as the
των γενετικώς
Greek
τροποποιημένων
foreign ministers, as
οργανισμών
regards the
και στην προκειμένη περίπτωση
GMOs,
του αραβοσίτου,
and in this
η
case, in the
ελληνική
case of
θέση
maize,
είναι απολύτως
the Greek
εναντίον
position is entirely
της
against
χορήγησης άδειας
the granting of
και πολύ
authorization
περισσότερο απολύτως εναντίον της δυνατότητας να
even more
καλλιεργηθούν
so
γενετικώς
against the
τροποποιημένοι οργανισμοί.
cultivation of GMOs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That concludes the press conference.